Hi everyone, welcome to tonight's webinar, Asperger's in Love, From Helplessly Confused to Head Over Heels. My name is Zoe Kessler and I'll be your host this evening on behalf of PsychCentral.com. Before we introduce tonight's presenter, I'd like to remind you that you will be able to access the complete webinar online at Psych Central's YouTube channel later this week. If you haven't already checked it out, Psych Central has videos and webinars on a wide variety of mental health topics with guest speakers from many disciplines. So check it out. During tonight's webinar, please feel free to ask questions by typing them into the question area on your control panel. We'll try to answer everyone's questions, but we will also do our best to wrap up the session within an hour. Alina's presentation will be about 40-45 minutes, then a question and answer period will follow. So let me tell you about tonight's presenter. Her name is Alina Kislenko, and she's a therapist in private practice specializing in ADHD, Asperger's, sex therapy, and couples issues. Alina's been running support groups for people with ADHD and Asperger's for the last 5 years, and she also hosts the Strange Brains talk radio show, which focuses on exploring strategies for people with ADHD and Asperger's. You can actually access podcasts of previous episodes through her website, and we'll give that information at the end of the webinar. As Alina knows what it's like to be on the other side of the conversation, having been diagnosed with ADHD and Asperger's syndrome herself, she strives to inject humor and warmth into the coaching process, and I can tell you she does achieve this. This year, Alina received the City of Guelph's prestigious Mayor's Award for her local and international impact on the ADHD and Asperger's community as a radio host, advocate, speaker, and educator. Of course, there's tons more to learn, so I'd invite you to visit her website at ADHDinterrupted.com. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome Alina and invite her to give her presentation. Hi, Alina. Are you there?
I am.
Terrific. Well, while I'm saying hello, I'm going to throw the controls over to you, and we'll jump into your PowerPoint presentation if you're all set.
Sounds great.
Super.
And so showing my screen. Awesome. Tell me when you see it. I'm sure it's booting up.
Perfect.
Anyway, as that's happening, good. As that is happening, and I'm going to minimize this. As that's all happening, I just want to bring up that I actually have Asperger's as well as ADHD myself and have been in quite a few relationships. And so a lot of this comes from not just learning about it from my clients, but learning about it for myself. And it's just been really, really good knowledge to have. So first, we have my first slide, and that just shows a little bit about the Asperger's world. So we've got things like, what part of, big formula don't you understand? We have people playing video games. We have themed weddings like Star Wars and a bunch of superheroes. We have Kinsey. Kinsey would be a great example of someone who would likely be diagnosed with Asperger's. And we have the relationship from the Big Bang Theory with Sheldon, and both of them would probably be diagnosable with Asperger's themselves. So just to give a little bit of picture. So now getting started, what are these Asperger's? I mean, first of all, it's pronounced Asperger's syndrome. There was a guy, a German man who that was his last name, so that's why we have it. People with Asperger's are also called Aspergians or Aspies, so just keep that in mind. And some definitely famous ones who have been diagnosed are people such as, we have Dan Aykroyd over here on the left. Then we have that woman who won American Idol, great singing.
Daryl Hannah.
And we have Daryl Hannah. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. And Doctor Who would be a good example of someone who might have it. We have House, who would totally be Aspergian. And there's also been quite a bit of speculation that the man who runs Facebook also could have it as well. So, especially if you watch The Social Network. So some of the things about Asperger's, if you know kind of what it is it involves rigid thinking structures, high IQ. So on the left, it's things that we're high at. On the right, it's things that we're low at. So high in rigid thinking structures, high in IQ, high with obsessions or hyper-focus, so example, technology and whatnot. We've got depression, high in that, social anxiety, OCD, those are common for people with Asperger's. We have a lot of social issues typically, and social anxiety and issues with small talk that come with that. On the low end, we sometimes have a low ability to understand others. It appears like low empathy or dismissiveness, abruptness. We have sometimes a low tolerance for disturbing stimuli. We'll be going into that a little bit later. We have some trouble adapting to change, so we find repetitiveness soothing typically, and we tend to miss norms. We don't really understand them and that kind of thing. Good. Then next, going into it, we have common relationship problems. So common problems that I've heard of in my practice that I've worked with a lot of clients around is maybe the non-Aspie partner feeling dismissed often, like they can't rely on us, especially if we're in the midst of our obsessions, like we have low empathy or compassion, that our concrete thinking leads to, shaming other people's needs, or like we don't understand why you want that, so we might say that's stupid, so it makes people feel unheard. We miss relationship norms, so might go to the kitchen and make your own meal and maybe not bring a meal back for your partner because we're just so lost in thought, or that's just not what we've prepared to do. Argumentativeness, rebelliousness, that can happen if we don't really feel understood and we don't have a way to communicate. Throughout the PowerPoint, we'll explain ways to communicate to avoid this. We typically have an inability to see your side, or it can look like that, and again, we can change that throughout the PowerPoint. I'll explain. We have strange preferences that can get in the way of doing things, like we don't want to go somewhere because it's too noisy, or we don't want to eat something because of the texture, we don't want to wear certain clothes. It's just things that can sometimes get in the way. Sometimes, very commonly in Asperger's, there's actually different, just like we have different preferences and norms for everything, that can come up with sexuality as well. There's also just having high expectations for our partners. Maybe that isn't really realistic, and we can be ridiculously honest, which can be blunt honesty at times as well. So Aspergian strengths, though, so we've gone through some of the things that, we don't do so well at sometimes, but some of the values of why it's so valuable to be in relationships with a person with Asperger's, and it's like nothing you'll ever do in your life otherwise, is that there's very, very high IQ and intelligence. A lot of people who are Asperger's, autistic savants, a lot of those have Asperger's. And really, I mean, there's so many of us out there that aren't diagnosed. They're usually the top CEOs of companies or people doing really, really well, but not connecting well to their social group. So you're always learning around us typically. There's high connection. We connect really well with animals or children typically. Strong loyalty, highly logical, very reliable personality. So kind of everything we do typically it's very reliable once you really get to know our patterns, so you can kind of predict things accordingly, and again, that very honest, you'll always know where you stand with us. Good, okay, so now we go into needs, so figuring out needs. That's one of the most important things in Asperger's when working with a partner. It's in a relationship, figuring out what are the things that I need from you and that you need from me, and how do we even figure those things out, because so often people can say, I'm really angry, I'm not getting anything I need, but nobody actually knows what they actually need. They know what they don't want. Nobody really knows what they do want. One way to figure out your needs is a really cool exercise called the emotional umbrella. It's got a few steps. So the first step is first pick the main emotion that you're feeling. So this is like, it's really good to figure out needs when you're just really frustrated, in that really emotionally frustrated, angry place, or whatever negative emotion you're feeling. That's a great cue that you have a need that's not being met in the relationship. So first, just name the main emotion. So let's say it's anger. I'm going to pick a scenario. Imagine that you're, out with your spouse. Say you're the one who has Asperger's, and your spouse keeps pointing things out that you're doing wrong. Like maybe you're doing things impolitely, or maybe you just did something weird in a conversation and you're feeling not great. So maybe one of the things you're feeling is anger. So we'll say that's the first one. So then we break that main emotion down to 3 sub-emotions. So you see the sub-emotion 1, 2, and 3 down there. And so that could, for example, in this situation be, sadness, embarrassment, and shame, and then we actually give them all percentages. So 20% sadness, probably 70% embarrassment, 10% shame. And then once we figure out the sub-emotions, what's the point of that? The point is to figure out what the heck do they all want. So for the first one, we have sub-emotion sadness, and in that moment, maybe the want is to belong, embarrassment. What does it want? Maybe to feel normal, like to not have the partner point things out all the time and make you feel really weird. And the third emotion, say it's shame, maybe it's just to be consulted before things are pointed out at you. So once you've figured out what each emotion needs, so sub-emotion, what it needs, so the last step is the action steps. So kind of set up 2 things that you could do under your own control that could make you more likely to get closer to getting those sub-needs met. So for example, in this situation, I could ask my partner that if I miss social norms, to only have them pointed out in private, or and a second thing I could do is go for a walk to relieve excess body tension, just to feel better right now until I talk to my partner about it. So just, and you'll see that after you do those action steps, anger will feel a little better, like the main emotion will feel better because it now has a plan. So that's a great way to figure out what you need. Good, so we figured out what we need, we've done the emotional umbrella. The second part is now asking for your needs. I mean, there's so many times when we're like, oh, I totally need this, but then there's that embarrassment, oh God, what if I ask, what if they say no? So this thing, the first thing, how to ask on the left side here, there's this thing called a win statement. It's a win statement because you'll see there's a big in bold, there's a W, there's an I, and there's an N, so a win statement. You can organize the 3 letters however you want. You can start with I, you can start with when, whatever, but the way that you make a win statement is you make it, this is called nonviolent communication. It goes under that category. So you're trying to state it in a way that I need this. It's got nothing to do with you doing something wrong. It's going to make you way more likely to get what you need. So an example of this could be, let's pick that last situation. So it could be, I feel angry when we're out with friends and my flaws are pointed out often. And the last part we go into, can we negotiate a way for you to be able to, mention the norms I'm missing if you need to, but maybe in a way where we do that in private. So that's where you put in your idea. So another example, let's say, say I'm angry, the dishes are never done. It could be, okay, I feel angry, or I feel sad, let's say, when I see that the dishes haven't been done. Can we negotiate around a better system than what we already have to make it more reliable? So there's very little accusation here, none in fact. We really just focus on facts, don't say interpretation. So you wouldn't say, when I see this mess is an interpretation. You go more with when I see the dishes are not done. Because the moment you say anything that can be interpreted, your partner, I guarantee you much of the time, will jump right in and say, that's not a mess, or they'll bring in their own interpretation. So it's really important to say either when I see what I interpret as a mess, or just when I see that the dishes aren't done. So you really want to focus on your experience. If your partner breaks in and says, no, but that's not true, you can say, that's you might not see it that way, but this is how I feel about it, and nobody can really argue about that. So the win statement is a very strong way to get your needs across. And now here's the second thing. If somebody else asks you, so now we're the second part, respond, the second part of this PowerPoint slide. If somebody asks you to get their needs met, or if you're the partner who's had this asked of you, or if you're the other person, somebody needs something from you, okay? It's really important to figure out to do this right, because if you do this right and you respond to other people's needs, they're going to be a million times more likely to care and respond to your needs well. So the 2 steps of a really healthy response is, in blue we have here, validate, step 1, and question or agree. Imagine that says number 2. So the 2 parts of a good, healthy response is validation and a question or agreement. So if you don't agree, it's a question. If you do agree, then you just end it with an agreement. So here's an example. So say my partner said, hey, can you just bring up stuff in private when I miss norms? I'm like, sure. A healthy response would look like, oh, I can totally see why that would be really hard on you. I hadn't thought of that. Or another good validation could be, thanks for telling me what you need. Then the second part, question, if I don't really agree or if I don't know what to do about that yet, I might say, oh, what don't you like about it when I do that? Or, what would it look like if I did it right? Or when do you think we could talk about it? So you're asking a question. If it's an agreement, you just validate, say, oh, thanks for bringing it up. I totally agree. Let's do that. Boom. But if the whole art is, if you don't agree with something, imagine that there's probably a good explanation somewhere and you just have to get to it together. So that's how you do a healthy response. Okay, so now we go into grounding. So now that's asking for needs and all that stuff, and that's really good. But if if the relationship or everything's just tense, if people are just tense a lot of the time, no matter how much people are good at asking for their needs, there typically ends up being a problem. People aren't really as receptive when they're not grounded. So what does grounding mean? Grounding is essentially, it means that our heart rate is low and our breathing is really nice and deep. Because the moment that our heart rate goes high or our breathing gets shallow, we get a really big spike in cortisol. So that's a stress hormone. And as the cortisol spikes, what happens is our IQ points actually go down. So we get about up to 15 points stupider in our IQ. And I don't know about you, but I personally can't risk that much. I am not that intelligent without those extra 15 IQ points. So, and especially in Asperger's, we're way more sensitive to stress. So yelling at us, anything like anger, shame, guilt, projecting that at us will really not get you what you need, because we're just going to become very animalistic at that point, and we're just going to get defensive. So grounding is a really great thing to do for either if you're feeling tense, to just detense in that moment, or just a preventative strategy to constantly detense. So a couple things here. So one thing is if your partner is bringing up their needs or bringing up something and you're starting to feel very tense, the first exercise here is taking space and using timers. So what that might look like is if you find that you can't talk about something right now, it would be saying something like validating. You can never go wrong with validating, so just saying, what we're talking about is really important. I think I need some time, though, to think about it because I'm starting to get kind of stressed. And then you would set a timer, and that you would tell your partner about when you're going to come back to the issue, or you put it in your Google Calendar or put it in your calendar, and then when the time comes, you follow up. So you come to the partner and say either, I need a bit more time, reset the timer, or you come back and say, okay, I'm ready to talk about it. This is really healthy because what happens without this is that one partner wants to talk, the other one does not want to talk, and what happens as a result is like the partner who doesn't want to talk just leaves in the middle of the conversation. The first partner feels like, oh my God, nobody's listening to me, so they chase, and nobody gets a break and nobody gets listened to. So using the timers is really, really a great way, especially if you negotiate it in advance and say, yeah, both of you agree that this is what we're going to use if we get stressed. Good. Second thing is breathing or bathroom breaks. So if you're noticing in the moment that you're getting really tense and you're really losing objectivity, so even just taking a couple of deep breaths, like belly breaths, expanding the belly, really deep breaths. Again, that drops the heart rate, that drops the breath rate, and drops those cortisol levels, giving you back your IQ points quite quickly. If breathing is not quite enough, I suggest just taking yourself away from the situation, also going for a bathroom break. If you smoke, maybe a cigarette break. If you don't, just standing outside for a moment, or just, again, the bathroom. But something to really remove, we call it a pattern interrupt, to just get out of the situation so that you can come back more fresh if you don't need like a longer space to rest, like with timers like we just discussed. The next exercise is the 5 and 5 exercise. So this one is really cool. You pick, so it works with all the 5 senses, and so you pick 5 things in each sense to look at. So this will usually be if you've gone to the bathroom or you've broken away and you said, I'll be right back, or you set your timer. This is a great exercise to take you back to baseline. So an example of it is, say, I look at 5 things I see, then I pick 5 things I smell, then 5 things I taste, 5 things I touch. Go through all the 5 senses and find 5 things for that. You can even repeat if you can't see or hear or smell or especially taste a lot of things at that moment. But that usually will take your brain off track enough that it'll come back to baseline, and you'll find coming back to the issue will be a lot easier. And lastly, I suggest daily calming time, just doing peaceful things. So I really like to work into my days lots of soothing things. Like I like to walk to work because usually the weather is beautiful, and that really naturally soothes me. And if my cortisol is even starting to mount, that's a little preventative thing I do for myself. Or, doing yoga or meditating, or just even enjoyable little things, playing a little computer game, doing whatever, but things that you're working into your day that you're doing frequently, so that if you're starting to peak in your cortisol, it really keeps bringing you down preventatively. Good. So next thing we go into is consent. Okay, so the reason I show a little illusion of, Paris there with Eiffel Tower is that looks like a face, or it looks like the Eiffel Tower and a person walking by with an umbrella. The reason I show that is that even though it feels like you've made a deal, like this is how we're going to do things, like I'm just going to start using a timer and you have consent towards that, that's fine, right? Like if nobody's actually asked about it and you just start using it, oftentimes techniques will not work. because even if you see it totally logical to do things one way, they likely see completely something different. That's something people with Asperger's are really, really good at. We're extraordinarily creative. We will reinterpret situations completely. So unless you think, like, be very clear about plans, about norms. It's just completely consent for everything. Otherwise, there's a lot of rebellion and arguing. So things to negotiate, for example, are norms, chores, how to, how to remind your partner safely in a way they're okay with, how to touch, maybe working around obsessions, like, hey, honey, what do I do when you're obsessed? Hey, maybe teaching the person with Asperger's how to praise you more often if you need that. Sometimes we kind of suck at remembering that. Maybe we don't need that much praise, so we don't remember to do it, and everything. And that takes us to the next slide. Ask all the questions. There's never enough questions. Keep asking. If you've run into something where you're like, oh my God, I don't know why they just did it that way, it's because you guys didn't ask enough questions and the system has not been mutually accepted. But once consensually a system is accepted, the person with Asperger's will really work with it, and it's the best thing ever for everyone. And then we go into renorming. So it's similar to consent, but it's really focusing on consent around norms. So don't just accept that we go to a concert and we're going to stand next to each other the whole time. For a person with Asperger's, they might be like, well, I like to stand by myself because then I don't have to think about taking care of you, and I get to be in the exact angle of the speakers that's right for him, or for me, but it's not right for you. So there might not be that norm. If we go to a concert, we stay together. So instead of getting angry when you find that a norm is not, you guys mutually don't agree, or instead of shaming them that, hey, well, everyone would, every other person I've ever dated would stay with me at the concert, or everyone else, every normal person wouldn't even need me to ask them to do this with me. We really totally throw that in the garbage and just realize that everything is just a question, and on the left there's some dice or a die about just questions. So who, is this true, if, does, you just all the questions. There's never enough questions. And also logic. Logic works really great. It's a bit of an odd thing, and there's some logic resources there on the right. Logic is so important because Aspies, we tend to have our own kinds of logic. However, if you understand our logic, and if you just learn logic in general and stop breaking logic yourself, we will really respect that, and it will actually help us really change and adapt. So for an example that is a common logic breaking thing that happens in relationships that can drive Aspies crazy and make them start just ignoring everything you say is, for example, so these are 4 logical fallacies. So the one on the top left is the straw man argument. So it's misrepresenting someone's argument to make it easier to attack. So it's like if I had said, hey, if I said, hey, I really need you to help me do the dishes because I have sensory issues, so I need your help. And if my partner then hyperboled that and we're like, oh, so you need me to do the dishes all the time and be your mother, then I'm like, no, that's not what I asked. Of course I don't want you to do it all the time. Of course I don't want you to be my mother. I just need some help with it right now. So it's really important that when you state things, try to avoid guilting, blaming, exaggerating, learn these logical fallacies and try not to make them. It's too easy to get into a huge fight because of them. But yeah, that's just something to research on your own. Then we have love languages. Love languages is so cool. So there's 5 love languages, and here's actually a list of them. So there's on the left in the little hearts, it says, so that we've got words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. So these are different ways that people love, and a lot of times the person with Asperger's will need love in a very specific way and will be giving love in a certain way, but you will need love to receive it and give it in such a totally different way. So the magic is really negotiating with each other, and a great way to do that is first both take the free test that I have here, 5lovelanguages.com. So I didn't create that, it was Dr. Gary Chapman, but it's awesome, so it's free, it's really quick, and once you've each figured out your love languages, I suggest both of you picking 5 things that make you feel loved and 3 things that make you feel unloved. Like both of you writing that down for yourselves, then sharing it with each other and doing your best to ideally do maybe for the first week, both of you try to do 1 thing for each other that makes you feel loved. And maybe the next week work on maybe 2 out of the 5 things on that list and more and more and more. So that's good. And also maybe put the list on the fridge of all those things that make both of you feel unloved. Ideally review it every week and try to more and more every week try to remove those love drills or those love poisons. That really helps love grow. And everyone is quite a bit more patient when the love tank is very high. Next, we have criticism ratio. Okay, so this is from Gottman's research, so Dr. John Gottman. He's amazing in terms of the relationship field. What they, like from watching thousands of couples, what they recognized was very unhealthy in relationships was any kind of ratio of anything more than 1 criticism per 5 positive experiences. So that might look like if there's like 1 criticism like, hey, you did the dishes wrong, that has to have been supported by maybe 5 nice things you said about them recently or 5 nice things you did for them or just 5 positive experiences. So to try to stay within the criticism ratio, try to really avoid yelling, name-calling, eye-rolling, or using the word disappointed. It's a trigger for a lot of us, Aspies. And things to do, use the win statement that we talked about earlier around needs. Use a calm tone. We call that a soft startup. Research has shown that when you use a calm tone, when you start a conflict, it usually ends giving each partner what they need much more than starting with a harsh tone. There's also bring up, I really suggest a weekly calibration. I'll get to that a little later, but a weekly meeting where you guys talk about things. So bring up your issues then instead of all the time to make the criticism ratio a little better. Then there's also a behavioral game. We'll be going into that soon. And there's being angry at the situation, not at the person. So more, I don't like what happened here, instead of you're a jackass. And lastly, ask questions. So that's the criticism ratio. Now, we mentioned the behavior game. Behavior game is awesome. So the way the behavior game works, it's like I've played this in my own relationships. I find them awesome. Is maybe set up a list of behaviors consensually that both of you have determined are hurtful to the relationship. So just like a bunch of like behaviors. Maybe it's like passive aggression. Maybe it's yelling. Maybe it's calling names. Maybe it's eye rolling. Whatever it is, but be very clear with your list. You don't want any ambiguity. It leads to fights. Step 2, set up rewards and consequences. So every time the partner who's not supposed to use this thing does it, then a really great set of terms is that maybe like the offending partner owes the other partner 2 minutes of help time just for any everyday thing, whatever, if they ask for it. And every day they don't use these, banned behaviors, then maybe that partner then wins 10 minutes for themselves of getting served, like of being helped in their own way. So that could be like, hey, all the time that is accumulated can go towards, hey, do special chores that I really hate or whatever. But it's just kind of a game that over time it really develops and changes. It's a behavioral strategy that leads to extinction of habits, because a lot of the stuff people don't do to be cruel to each other, it's just the instinct. And so the more that you create other paths and discourage that instinct, new instincts will grow. So also just check in every week during those weekly meetings to check in, is the way this game is going, is that working for everyone? Is there anything ambiguous about it? What do you think? So behavior game steps right there. Next, we have passion sharing. Okay, so in Asperger's, one of the biggest parts about us is that we are obsessed with stuff. We become brilliant at them, but generally we're obsessed, and that can be good and bad, but we typically have quite a few hobbies that we love. Now, the best way to really create bonding in the relationship is either to share our hobbies with us or find new hobbies that we're really into and to do together. So really common ones could be something active, like maybe karate or rock climbing together, maybe going to lectures on favorite topics. Video games are really common in the Asperger's community. Maybe painting. There's this thing called meetup.com where there's just special event groups, like photography groups and all that kind of stuff, that if you go there, you can meet like groups of other people who want to find friends, so maybe going with your partner, or Toastmasters, so things where you go to Toastmasters, so it'll be really good for social anxiety, but also good bonding time together and good creative time. So just some things to keep in mind. Passion sharing is a huge way to create more bonding in the relationship. Then we have sensory issues. So this is really important. I mentioned it earlier. It's an issue that we typically have. We tend to kind of, I guess, annoy. We tend to annoy our partners with all our weird sensory needs, and a lot of us don't even understand our sensory needs. So sometimes we think that our sensory needs, like we're just being stupid, but we can't help ourselves. But in Asperger's, it's really common to have something called sensory integration dysfunction. And sensory integration dysfunction, I have this myself. What it looks like is that certain senses really just blow our circuitry and like completely crash our computer. So I put at the bottom actually really common sensory issues. So first on the left we have a sheep. So that's wool. So some like the texture of wool can be really hard for a lot of Aspies. Then I put in the middle peanut butter. That's actually mine. I hate sticky textures. I don't know, they just really break my brain a little bit. Then there's a group of people talking, so even just groups can be just the volume can be too high, or whatever, the sensory experience can be too high, or even lighting conditions or whatever. So when an Aspie person says, I don't like this, usually it doesn't mean they don't like it exactly. It usually actually means they have a good reason, but they might not even be clear about it. Ask questions. Oh, what don't you like about wearing these kinds of shirts? Or what don't you like about, cooking dinner? Like, why don't you typically do it? Is there something that's stopping you? So ask a lot of those questions. Be curious. You're going to get fascinating answers. And then as you take them seriously, we will be so happy and feel so loved that we will just be so appreciative, and we'll do lots of the love language stuff to take care of you as well. Now, I mentioned the weekly calibrations. These are super important. Weekly calibrations are a great time to meet every week. I suggest about 45 minutes, and there's a couple of things I suggest to do. First, there's a form I have here that we'll get to in a second. So it's a form that you can fill out about how did the things that you're both working on to get better on this week, how did that go? Are things improving? That kind of thing. I'd also suggest during this time checking the love languages. Like, if you're trying to bring in more and more love languages, checking in, how's that going? Are you doing it right in the way the partner wants? Remember, just because you think you're doing it doesn't mean you're doing it in a way that they actually are expecting it or can understand it. So keep asking those questions. Just because it's obvious to you, it is not obvious to them. Then we have maybe if you're playing the behavior game, checking in on rules for that. Are the agreed list of behaviors too ambiguous? Do you have to change them? Do we have to add more behaviors, take away some behaviors? And lastly, learning a new logical fallacy together, as I mentioned before, just learning things not to do in a fight. These are amazing ways to stop crazy-making behaviors, meaning, people are talking about the same thing but interpreting different things, and because of all these fallacies and distortions in the conversation, nobody gets the point. Good. So this is the form I mentioned that it could be done during this 45-minute weekly calibration. So this is one I made. So it's maybe make a list of 4 things you really appreciated the partner did this week. So that's good for the criticism ratio, getting a lot of positives out there. 1 thing the partner did especially well. 1 thing you'd like them to improve on this week. Maybe specific instructions on how you'd like them to improve it. Again, specificness is really important. Never just assume they get it because it's obvious to you. Then we get 1 win statement. So both choose maybe something that even bothered you a tiny bit this week and just make a win statement out of it to start that conversation. Then we have a love tank score. So check, so a love tank is essentially how loved do I feel this week. So 10 is really loved, 1 is not at all. Put your score there and figure out your average love score. So after a little while you start noticing actually my average is 8. When I'm at 7 or 6, it means something's wrong, so we have to fix it. Even little things. It's really good to preventatively fix these things before they explode the whole relationship. And yeah, if you do find that your love tank score is really low compared to average, then I really suggest doing the emotional umbrella right here. So do that whole exercise again on 1 emotion that is really bothering you. Through doing these preventative strategies, you're really avoiding these outbursts, argumentativeness, just disrespectful behaviors. You're really getting to know each other, and that's really what a relationship's about. So a lot of things we talked about here. We talked about the emotional umbrella. We talked about renorming together with logic and other things, just asking a lot of questions. We talked about win statements and validating responses. We talked about doing a weekly 45-minute calibration. We talked about the 5 love languages. Remember the different ways to feel and be loved, physical love, gifts, words of affirmation, acts of service. Learn more about those at 5lovelanguages.com. They're so amazing. Grounding, so really preventing yourself from getting too angry to even work with your partner to be more patient. Passion sharing, so the more you guys can share, passions and really respect each other and love each other, the better things will go. The criticism ratio, 5 to 1, so for every 1 thing you're going to do that's criticism, make sure that you have a lot of positives, and the behavior game. And lastly, so after all the hard work, why are we in these relationships? Essentially, it's just the pros of dating an Aspie in a healthy relationship. We are so loyal, high level of acceptance. We will, if you accept us, we will accept anything about you. We're extremely thoughtful and kind when we understand what's needed to do that. We like to do things right when we feel that when we know what we're supposed to be doing. So we can become very skilled lovers, parents, very talented workers, so can really rise high professionally, especially if we're supported and understood at home, and gives us energy to really succeed in the world. We can be very reliable and dependable we put in the hard work. We're great at helping solve your problems and to help you see the world more objectively, and we're very interesting because we're always learning. We can always teach you things. We see the world as such a fascinating place worth learning. And I just have a couple pictures of, a couple there, like showing the Vulcan sign. It's like it can be happy, doing sports together, reading together. It might look different than a normal relationship, but it can still be so incredibly happy, perhaps more so. And to keep learning about things past this presentation, I suggest doing research on negotiation tactics, logic, I statements, or nonviolent communication. Those are very similar. And listening skills, because these are so important. You can't just assume that you know what your partner is thinking or why they're doing something. In fact, research has shown that people who actually don't know themselves very well, who make bad assumptions about what the intentions of other people are usually people in relationships when they've been in a relationship for a really long time. Those are the ones who are really not understanding each other. They actually misunderstand each other more often than strangers, research has found. So asking those questions, listening to the answers, really figuring out who is your partner today, not just who were they a month ago, who were they a year ago today. And then we go into the Asperger's Couples Retreat. I'm running one because, just to get all this info, there's so much to learn. So I'm running one. It's November 12th to November 18th this year. It's going to be in Victoria, BC. There's info at the website. There's lots of info on the website, but some of it can be found at ADHDinterrupted.com, and there's a tab that says retreats, so go there if you want to learn more info. We also have some books. So these are, I honestly, I haven't even read them all. One that I definitely read that I loved is Journal of Best Practices, a memoir of marriage and Asperger's syndrome, One Man's Quest to be a Better Husband. So cool. He created these forms every week. He's a middle manager. He would get his wife to rate him on these behaviors they were working on. It really helped, which is why I developed that form earlier on that we talk about. I love that. And a lot of the information I got about Asperger's is from the research, so I haven't read all these books. These I hear are pretty good ones. So Asperger's in Love, Couples, Relationships, and Family Affairs by Maxine Aston, and Loving Someone with Asperger's Syndrome by Cindy Ariel. And so if you want more information, because there's always more to learn, I'm really active on Facebook, too active, on our Facebook page, ADHD Interrupted. Probably post like 4 new research articles or interesting tidbits or whatever, like a day. And even though it's ADHD Interrupted, it's about Asperger's as well. Then we also are on Twitter. We have our main website, ADHDinterrupted.com, where you can go, get the info on the retreats. And we run Asperger's groups weekly here in Guelph, and we have podcasts all about this stuff, and you can email me if you have any further questions, Alina at ADHDinterrupted.com. So yeah, thanks so much for being here and sitting with me, and this is so much fun exploring this stuff.
Wow. Alina, thank you. That was an amazing presentation. We do have questions coming in, so
Awesome.
Let's see, 20 minutes left. Okay, I do want to chime in and say to everybody who's listening, Alina is so active on Facebook, and it's true. She shares the most amazing stuff. I've been following her on Facebook and Twitter for a while now, and it's always a really, really enriching experience.
Aww.
Yeah,
Thank you,
so I better not hog any more time. Okay, so we'll leave your information up for a second, and maybe we'll switch over to show the YouTube, the Psych Central YouTube channel. But in the meantime, our first question, and thank you everybody, don't forget to type your questions into the question panel. So Alina, we've got one from one of our participants or audience members asking, how do you confirm if you or your partner has Asperger's if you suspect it is so?
That is a wonderful question. Some of the possible ways to do this are, I would suggest definitely going to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Psychologists are the best. They'll do a full assessment. And so that's just the best way to know. But there are little Asperger's tests that you can take if you really suspect things. For example, at the website, ADHDinterrupted.com, if you go to the first page, you'll see a little Asperger's test on there that you can take just right on the front page at ADHDinterrupted.com. Yeah, and so that's got info to at least give you a hint of, does your partner maybe have it? I know on there I was actually scored when I took it at about probably has it. and especially if you're a woman, it may be a little bit skewed. So it's a lot harder to diagnose Asperger's in women than men. But yeah, I suggest go together to the psychologist. The psychologist will need as much information, background info to figure this out as possible.
So Alina, a psychologist, not a psychiatrist?
Psychiatrists can diagnose. Oftentimes, mostly what they do is they're really great for medications. In Asperger's, it's rarely needed that much directly for the Asperger's. It's just a different kind of brain. We don't typically need that much medication.
Okay.
But a psychologist will really figure out your IQ, what you're good at, what you're bad at, and if you have Asperger's or not with like an 8-hour assessment versus a psychiatrist might see you for an hour.
Great. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. That's great. Okay, so here's another question. My Aspie son is 15, and I learned some great tools here that I hope to use with him. I have a lot of relationship repairing to do to gain mutual trust with one another. Thank you. Oh, sorry, it wasn't a question, but
I love that.
Amazing. Yeah.
I love hearing people saying, oh, this is like helping me understand my son or my husband or my girlfriend, because it's all we need is understanding, but really so much of what we get instead is shame and anger and yelling. So the more we can get people on our side and curious about us, oh my gosh, how happy we will be.
Okay, more questions, and I see we've got, almost 15 minutes. Great. Do Aspies tend to gravitate to certain love languages?
Let me go to that slide. I would say no, not really. I mean, we all have different ones. For example, mine are quality time and words of affirmation. I would really say talk to your partner with Asperger's and ask them what are theirs. That's why here in this section we say you list 5 things each of what makes you feel loved or what your partner has done for you in the past that makes you feel loved. And then do that. That's just the best way to really target each other's love languages, for sure.
Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, here's a good one. Okay, from someone else. Okay, and I think we're going to switch the screen over now, if you don't mind, to Psych Central's YouTube
Sure.
channel.
Although I might answer the questions a little bit by going through the slides. So just if I can, however that works best.
Okay. 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 All right. Okay, so the next question is, my Aspie partner does not praise me for anything, and this has had bad effects on my self-esteem. Can this be helped?
Definitely. So we're at the love language slide already, and in here you see we have yours. One of your main love languages is likely words of affirmation. A funny thing with Aspies, because we're not about when people say we do a good job, we really like results a lot of the time. So we don't think that we need to tell other people when they're doing well. They just see that we're more loving towards them or whatever. A lot of Aspies, can enjoy the acts of service love language, so they might want to love you through doing stuff for you, but they might not say anything about your achievements. So in that case, a lot of things, first just talking to each other, sitting down, taking the love language test, telling him or her what words of affirmation means to you. And here are some examples of actions. So written cards and letters might be your way, or encouraging words, compliments, just finding a creative way together that you guys can work on it that your partner feels really open to doing is really a great way to go about it. Again, it's that consent. So if you say, hey, do this for me, they might be like, I don't know how. That's valid. Talk about it until they know how.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Great, excellent. Okay, now this is a comment. It wasn't really a question, but maybe it'll mean something to you because we have different languages. So somebody is saying, Maxine Aston says that people with Asperger's are depriving our partners of affection. She uses a metaphor of a rose in the desert. So it's not really a question. Did you
No,
want to
yeah,
comment?
Sure. It can really look like we're depriving, our partners of things, or that we're looking like we're bad partners. But so much of the time is we don't know what normal things are to do in a relationship. We don't know what we're missing. We have no idea how to do those things, and we might even know that we're not doing it right. We still don't know a way that's us related, like how we want to do it, that is right. So maybe we know how ideally people would do it, but that's not really part of our personality type, so we don't know how. So again, it's that conversations. I would specifically suggest those weekly calibration sessions, talking to each other, like what hurt, what were those poisons, what is not working, is there too much criticism, or what are positive ways to support each other that make you feel really loved. It's going to be different for everyone.
Okay, yeah, that's good. And I have to say that I kind of noticed when you said, we know we're not doing it right. I guess because I do a lot of writing about ADHD and thinking about that as well, there's so much overlap I find. And you mentioned you've got both. So I try not to, I don't think people with Asperger's do things wrong. They just do them differently. So that whole
Right.
thing about we're not doing it right, it's like, nah, come on. It's just, I agree. It's like a different brain. It's like ADHD is a different brain as well. I try to think I'm
Exactly.
not doing it wrong. I'm just doing it differently. And I'd love
Right.
to learn how,
Creatively.
yeah, how everybody else is doing it. So, if I feel like being a chameleon and fitting in, I will.
Right, or if you have the
Yeah.
energy that day. I really,
Yeah.
in Asperger's, we tend to have a social tank. So there's so much that
Mm.
we can think of other people, and then afterwards, if we've thought too much about others, we have to go and recede back into our caves and recalibrate ourselves. So, if they're not giving you what you need, maybe they're overusing their social juices, and they really need to talk to you and figure out what they really need to do for you. But they don't have to do the other things they've been doing that has been just wasting energy for no reason.
Yeah, I totally get that whole energy thing. Anyway, there's more questions, so I don't want to hog all
Yes.
your time here. Okay, someone is asking, do you have any advice for someone who is autistic and not straight?
Not straight. Oh, not heterosexual. Yes, totally. Let's see. A lot of the stuff will apply exactly the same. I would say there's probably just more negotiating, more because society at that point isn't giving you as many cues. Maybe the movies aren't giving you as many cues, and in a lot of ways, I think that's actually awesome because then there's less norms for us to fail.
Oh.
So, again, it's just that figuring out what do you both like to do. Like here I have, on my front page, I just showed all these themed weddings and these other things because it's like there's no normal. And, it could also just be good enough and great, and it's just whatever you guys think is the right way. It's just really important to let go of right or wrong and bring in more right or wrong for this relationship or right and wrong for me. And then what's right and wrong for them and negotiating, finding something in the middle. So, yeah, even better. No norms to get wrong as often.
Beautiful. I love that. That's perfect. Okay. Here's a sort of more mundane one. Are the forms available at your website?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I haven't put them up
Great.
yet, but I will. It's going to
Okay.
be, the form will be up at this exact place. Let me just take us there.
I have to tell you, I'm a little distracted by the slides, honestly.
Yeah, I'm trying to get there. Sorry.
Yeah, that's
I'm totally
okay.
distracting everyone. It's wherever the couples retreat page is. I have it here.
But they can easily find it, I'm sure, on
Yes, go to ADHDinterrupted.com and then under
Okay.
retreats. Yes,
Great.
exactly.
Okay.
Here it is. This is the website address that it's going to be at.
Okay. All right. Here's another question. What time is it? Okay, 10 minutes. My non-Aspie partner finds it hard to get, in quotes, what seems really obvious and logical in my mind. It is hard to have a meeting of minds. What can reduce the distance between us?
Oh, yeah, totally. I would suggest, especially those weekly calibrations are going to be so important in this scenario. Oh, my goodness. If you could meet every week, and just talk about, okay, so what assumptions are we making, what's happening, or if you need to do it within the week, saying, doing that win statement. So those win statements, remember those 3 steps. So it was like so I'm just getting there right now. So it's so here we go. So when we are driving and we're driving at a speed that feels too high for me, I feel really anxious. Can we negotiate a different way of driving when I'm in the car, right? So you want to bring things up as a very curious, and you're always ending in a question. You always end in a question if you're confused. Don't just make a statement. I call that a dead fish. Like everything's horribly wrong, or everything you're doing is wrong, or whatever, and then you just leave it there. And what happens there is the person then feels blamed and shamed, and they don't have a solution. You don't have a solution. Everyone's cortisol is spiking. Everyone's really stupid at that moment. So just make sure that when you have a request, end with the question, like, tell me more about this, or can we negotiate this? That'll take you guys really far.
Okay. All right. That's good. So yeah, that's great. So you have given us a lot of tools. It's a lot to absorb, and I just want to remind everybody that there will be a video replay on YouTube on Psych Central's YouTube channel, which I'm going to show you in a moment. And also, of course, that Alina is doing her retreat, and I guess, Alina, you're going to do some training in these different exercises
Yeah,
and
they're
practices
not
stuff, I guess,
easy.
eh?
Yeah, the PowerPoints,
Okay.
I'm going to also put it on that retreat page on the website, ADHDinterrupted.com under retreats. The PowerPoint will be there waiting soon as
Oh,
well as
great.
mentioning it on my Facebook, obviously,
Okay,
when it comes
so
out.
will people, I do have a question about that actually. That's a good
Hmm.
segue. Someone is asking if they can actually have a copy of the PowerPoints. Will this be like a downloadable thing?
Yeah, right at the website, if you go to ADHDinterrupted.com, just getting to that retreat website again, ADHDinterrupted.com at the retreats tab, I'm going to have the PowerPoint there at least. It might be in other places too, but yeah, right here, ADHDinterrupted.com/retreats. PowerPoint will
Okay,
be right there.
okay, good. All right. Oh, there's a comment here about the thing
Ooh.
there was something we were talking about earlier. Affection might be more visible if the 5 love languages are explored, not a rose desert, maybe dessert.
I love that. Yes, once exploring things, you'll find that both of you have likely been working so hard in the completely wrong direction.
Yeah.
So it's just about figuring out what's the right direction. Let's go together instead of wasting all this energy and hating each other. It's so inefficient.
hmm Okay. Oh, we have a little comment here. Just someone is saying, "Thank you, Alina. Nicely done."
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
that's
Yay,
always nice.
praise. I love praise.
Yeah,
My love language is words of affirmation, so thank you.
don't we all? And there are some nice compliments coming in. And there's someone is saying just buying things, and I'm not
Mm.
really sure what that means. It's just sort of on
Mm.
its own.
Just buying things. Well,
Um,
I know in Asperger's sometimes we have trouble making decisions, or we can like overdo stuff, so we can get obsessed with, say, an obsession like, Star Trek, and then buy all the paraphernalia and hoard it or something. So that can definitely happen. Again, that's about renegotiating, bringing up your needs in a constructive way, ending with a question, and not dismissing their needs, not saying this is stupid, get rid of it, but more, what do you think we could do about this? I'm sure you have a totally good reason for it, but please tell me more about it.
hmm Okay. Thank you. And oh, here's another one. Okay, is communication usually difficult between Aspie and non-Aspie relationships?
Oh my God, yes. um,
Oh,
yeah,
don't
it can be
hold
very
back. Tell
different.
us what you really think.
Yeah, it can be different from normal relationships because normal relationships they have the same norms, right? So it's like, say you go to the kitchen, you make dinner, the other person already knows, oh, they're going to make me dinner, and then you actually get dinner too. These are just norms that society knows. You're more likely to have them met. However, you might also be more prone to getting into more societally relevant problems like cheating or like I don't know, not being honest in relationships versus with Aspies, our norms are to be crazy honest all the time. Unless we see that you're not okay with our honesty, you will know where we are at all times. So if you're curious and let us stay honest by supporting and being really good listeners while we're doing that instead of judging, then the norm, it can be so much stronger even by, I don't know.
Hmm.
I've really enjoyed my relationships with other people with Asperger's personally.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Alina. Nicely done. Great, Alina. So people, I guess, are really, and I totally get why they're very much enjoying your webinars. So,
Thanks,
um,
Zoe.
thank you. I definitely want to have you back again. There's so much to explore. Okay, here's
Yay.
another question. What do you do with your partner's obsessions?
Hmm. Well, it depends. I mean, if there's something wrong with the obsession or that you perceive as wrong, like, for example, my dad's really into astronomy, we both have Asperger's, so he'll like leave at 2 in the morning maybe and go out and, I don't know, like in the middle of the night and go do astronomy stuff, and that is hard for my mom, for example. So that just, it's about negotiating. So starting it with, when I see that my husband isn't there in the middle of the night, I feel really confused. Can we negotiate a different way to warn me when you're going out in the middle of the night, or a different system that works better for us? But if if it's just a good thing, like if they're just into passions and they're just too into it, then I suggest either jump in with them, do it together, or B, again, renegotiate just around times. How long are we going to do it? What days are we not going to do it? You know, how do we still get time together? 'Cause that's probably what the problem is. It's not that they're over-obsessed, just that there's not enough time left for you or other things. So that's what we really need to answer.
Right. Yeah, okay. That's cool. That makes perfect sense. And I'm just going to, you might notice I'm just going to switch over because I
Yep.
notice we've only got a couple minutes left. Oh no, this has gone so fast. Oh, before we go,
Yes.
and this is a question for me actually, I know you've got a retreat coming up and you've listed
Mm-hmm.
some books and we've got your website address. Are there
Mm-hmm.
any other resources like support groups or
Yes.
what else can someone do if they're looking for more information about this topic?
Definitely. Okay, so first of all, other than those books that I mentioned, so we run, I mean, if you're in Guelph by any chance, we run groups weekly for people with Asperger's and
That's
ADD, and it's
Guelph
really
on,
cool.
let me
In
interrupt,
Guelph,
excuse me.
Ontario.
Yeah, Ontario,
That's right.
Canada. Thank you.
But if you're not here, I would say there's probably a group locally to you. So just Google, Asperger's group, your town name, or there's even some online Asperger's support groups. So there could be like support groups for people with one Asperger's partner or for Asperger's relationships. Just Google it. You'll find there's so much online that is accessible to anyone.
Excellent. Of course, you don't always know what best information is, but I guess,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. All right. Well, jeepers creepers. Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up. We've only got a minute or two left. So is there anything you'd like to add before we say goodbye?
Maybe just that there's so much that it can get better. I mean, if the relationship is broken, it's not often because maybe just the person is wrong for you or there isn't enough love there. It's usually just those love poisons are just getting in the way. And once you remove them and increase those positive experiences together, it could be the most satisfying relationship you've ever had. But if it's not working for you, you could be incompatible. So you could get to know each other and be like, these needs are not compatible with my needs, and that's okay too. So just not to feel stuck and to feel hope, but realistic hope that if this is the right relationship for you, it's got to be really great. And if it's not, maybe it's the right one for you after you work on it.
Great. Okay.
Oh, and see a couples therapist. See a couples therapist. It's really hard to do this on your own.
Oh, okay. Good to
Oh
know.
yeah.
Good to know. Okay. Well, thank you, Alina, so much for taking the time to do this for us. Really, really appreciated. I want to thank you, Alina, and I want to thank everybody who listened in live to our webinar, and also to those of you who are listening to the replay, which of course will be at the website address you see on your screen, youtube.com/Psych Central. Again, I'll just mention that we do have another webinar from Alina. I think that's on the YouTube channel as well. And we have webinars on all kinds of different topics. So please do check it out. And as Alina mentioned, please at her website for more information and downloadable forms. So on behalf of Psych Central, thanks everyone so much. We will have
Thank
another
you.
webinar next month. And Alina, thanks. And
Thank you so much for having me on.
thank you. We'll meet again. Okay, good night.
Night
Bye.
night.